Live from the headquarters of Tell Us Your English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sweeney Gray. After leaving NATO member nations exasperated with his fiery comments, U.S. President Donald Trump has landed in London for a 3-day visit. It is his first official visit to Britain since he took office. Massive protests have been organized by different social movements across the country from Thursday till Saturday. Over 100,000 people are expected to gather in London in a series of protests under the banner Stop Trump Coalition and Carnival of Resistance. Some of them have also inflated a giant Trump baby balloon that will be flown over Parliament on Friday when the U.S. President meets Prime Minister Theresa May.
What we see in Trump is somebody who has an overinflated ego, and when things don't go his own way, he throws his toys out of his pram. But he's also, as robust as he may seem to be, he's also very, very thin-skinned when it comes to being ridiculed. And so we thought that this Trump baby was a fantastic way of representing all of that about Trump and of getting through to him.
So we're now being joined live from London by Sebastian Ordonez. He's a senior program officer from War on Want, which is part of the Stop Trump Coalition. Hello, Sebastian. Thank you so much for joining us. So this is the first of the protests against the visit of Donald Trump. Some of them are underway and several more are planned, including in Scotland, actually. So tell us who's involved and what we can expect from these protests.
Hi there, Sonia. Yeah, thank you. So the Carnival of Resistance is going to bring together over 100,000 people up and down the country that are going to be protesting against the policies and the politics that the United States president represents. You know, it's a politics that is literally turning back the clock towards some of the most darkest moments of our history. You know, it's creating a fertile ground for inequality, for the climate crisis, for racist scapegoating, and undermining our human rights.
Now, Sebastian, talk to me about your organization, the War on Want. Why are they involved in these protests?
So War on Want is an anti-poverty charity that believes in human rights and believes in global justice. And what we're doing is attempting to send a clear message that the UK government shouldn't be normalizing the politics of hate, which is targeting women, migrant communities, Muslims, communities of color. And actually what we're saying is the so-called special relationship between the US and the UK should be founded on the solidarity that there exists between all of those communities that stand up to hate and stand up for global justice in the US, in the UK, and around the world.
Now, tell me, the U.S. president has had a very tense meeting with European leaders at the NATO summit, and the British government is in turmoil over Brexit. So what do you think the political impact of Trump's visit, especially for your Prime Minister Theresa May?
I think part of the discussions that Theresa May will be having with Donald Trump is about a possible US-UK trade deal after Brexit. But we know that this type of trade deal will essentially end up ripping apart our human rights, our healthcare, and the environmental protections that may leave public services like the NHS under real threat. We know the impact, the massive impact that these type of trade policies have had on communities and workers and on the environment in the global south. So it should be clear to the UK government that promoting this type of trade deal will have a really negative impact for communities in the UK also.
So, Sebastian, I'm not sure if you're seeing our screen, but we have live pictures of some of the protests that are taking on right now. What are your plans for today? When are you heading out?
So we're collecting our energies and making sure that everything is ready for tomorrow, which will be, the biggest of the protests. But as you can see from the images there.
Oh. Okay. Are we hearing Sebastian? No, we've lost him. So we're probably going to try and connect with Sebastian a little later, but he gave us a very good look at the protests in London and what his organization wants to achieve. Other news now, the rise in fuel prices in Haiti was a measure announced by the government and was revoked immediately when it caused intense protests. Now Haiti tries to return to normal.
Port-au-Prince tries to go back to normal, but in the streets there is still the smell of the smoke after several days of fiery protests.
The people say to the president that we cannot take it anymore. We have a country where hospitals do not work, there are no social projects, and the justice system does not work either.
With the increase in fuel prices by more than 50%, transportation unions called for a 2-day strike, sending hundreds of people into the streets. At least 3 deaths have been registered.
For me, this riot started a long time ago. I started with the budget approved by the parliament, and on Friday it was the last strike from the government and everything changed. We think that the people that took to the streets were asleep, and now they are opening their eyes to say enough, and that they can't take this misery any longer.
A group of students say they were attacked by police during the protests.
I was arrested. I still don't know the reason. I'm not a thief. I'm a student. The police hit me a lot and then they took me away. It was the president of the university who helped me to leave. They will continue because that is their intimidation, because the president pays the police to react this way.
Today, the call to the opposition to return to the streets had no effect. While the president has been meeting with the presidents of the Senate, the lower house and the High Council of Judiciary to seek a solution to the damages caused by the days of protests.
Okay, so we're going to head into a break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. On Wednesday, the Truth, Justice and Peace Commission in Nicaragua presented a preliminary report on the violent acts that took place between April 18th and July 4th. The report points out that many of the 237 dead, many were involved in street blockades. The report also says that people were killed during the crossfire, and that there were a small number of falsely reported deaths, which were spread over social media. Commission member Jaime Lopez Lowry also mentioned the blockades preceded the dialogue tables. Nearly half of the fatalities took place in Managua. Members of social organizations met with the United Nations delegation in Colombia to denounce the murders of social leaders and continuous threats to their territories. According to the UN, more than 100 social leaders have been murdered so far in 2018.
The United Nations organization in Colombia issued a warning about the humanitarian crisis in the country after the wave of murders of social leaders.
For me, it seems terrible that in a country that is currently going through a historic moment, where we will have a new government and where we have a peace process, the people are murdered for speaking up.
International organizations qualified as brutal the murder of social leaders that defended life and the dignity of the communities.
There is a difficult human rights situation that social leaders are facing in Colombia. Every day they are victims of murders and brutal violence. We have proved this in the last few weeks.
Threatened social leaders arrived to Chocó, Valle del Cauca, Meta, Guajira, Sucre, Cauca, Nariño, and Putumayo to denounce the constant murders of social leaders in the country.
These are systematic killings. 36 leaders from COCAM have been recently murdered. Why are they persecuting those who beg for peace to transform their territories? They are persecuting the leaders that have defended peace and reject the use of illicit crops to transform their territories. Doesn't it raise a flag that more than 200 leaders of Marcha Patriótica have been murdered?
They also denounced the failure of the state to provide guarantees and said the local government's answer is that there is no money. They added they don't trust the authorities, the police, or the prosecutor's office.
We've gone to the police to denounce violence to a social leader before. As soon as we left the police station, the paramilitary called us to tell us, "We know you went to the police station to file a complaint." That's why we don't believe in the police or the prosecutors.
Leaders are demanding the government for security guarantees in the campesino communities and demanded the authorities to support measures of self-protection that the communities are taking in their territories.
In Bolivia, feminist groups are urging institutions to put in new measures to put an end to gender violence as attacks against women continue to rise.
Gender violence in Bolivia increased in the first quarter of 2018 compared with the same period last year, according to official figures.
At least 61 women have been killed by their partners this year. If the numbers continue on this trajectory, we will have more women killed in 2018 than in 2017.
A law against gender violence was passed 5 years ago. It hasn't made much of a difference.
One of the main obstacles for victims is that the judicial process is expensive and long. Women face emotional difficulties, and the system is not providing them with the help they need to continue with their cases.
But the news is not all bad. More women are coming forward to report cases of abuse.
I don't think violence is increasing as such. The thing is, nowadays, cases are reported. Still, they are not as reported as we wish, because many times gender violence is covered as other crimes, which penalties are not as tough.
An opinion that is shared by feminist organizations, who say that the law is not enough if institutions and society do not commit to real change.
Things need to change within the institutions. For instance, police should reward officers specialized in gender violence. But workforce changes each year, and so we lose what we achieved.
Official figures from the Attorney General say that 61 women have been killed during the first 6 months of 2018 by their partners. In addition, it registered 12,746 cases of gender violence.
The government of Argentina has withdrawn its offer for any information on the whereabouts of the Ara San Juan submarine. The submarine went missing on November 15, 2017, south of the Atlantic Ocean with 44 members on board. The reward of about $4.9 million was offered for any significant proof, photos or video of the location of the submarine. After the announcement, relatives of the crew have called for protests this Sunday. Mass layoffs continue in Argentina as the government signed a decree that puts an end to assistance for public universities. This decision is part of the IMF's demands and will leave thousands without a job.
Decree 632, published in the government's official bulletin, will not only leave 6,000 workers without jobs, but it will also freeze hirings until the end of Mauricio Macri's term in office.
This is a two-pronged issue. The first is that on December 31st, thousands of people will be left on the streets, while the others that their positions will not be filled. We don't know if they even have a plan to cover the holes these layoffs will cause in schools, hospitals, research centers, nursing homes, etc.
Facing this new attack by Macri's government, union leaders warn they have planned various protests to demand the end of mass layoffs and the repeal of the labor reform.
We have to put an end to these measures. They are thinking ahead to when they can hire us back under worse circumstances. They want us to submit. This fight will be hard. It will be cruel.
For the university community, Decree 632 gravely damages workers and the public universities.
During the terms of Nestor and Cristina Kirchner, the government supported public universities. They saw them as a great asset for their government and for society.
Montero believes these cuts are emblematic of Macrism.
This is a planned model of misery. They want to dumb down the population by using the media and by shutting down public universities. These schools have always produced great criticisms of the establishment. They have created alternative proposals for development, always thinking of social needs.
The government has previously stated they are employing 30,000 more workers than necessary.
In Peru, people took to the streets of the capital city, Lima, to condemn corruption in the country. Protesters marched and gathered outside the Supreme Court headquarters, carrying banners and chanting to reject another case of alleged corruption involving the highest levels of the country's institutions. Several recordings were recently leaked of judges and members of the National Council of Magistrates ordering penalty reductions and asking for favors and setting rates for shady deals. Peruvian President Martin Vizcarra has proposed a judicial reform to end the corruption.
I want to announce that my government will undertake this reform, which will allow us to build an effective, timely, efficient, transparent, and incorruptible judicial system. I called the State Council and asked Congress to apply Article 157 of the Political Constitution to remove the members of the National Council of Magistrates. Audios reveal not only that the people called to administer justice acted with an enormous degree of immorality, but the existence of mechanisms, practices, and vices that prevent and contaminate the judicial system and must be eradicated.
Ecuador's Constitutional Court upheld a $9.5 billion claim against the oil giant Chevron for damages over decades that harmed indigenous people in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Social and indigenous organizations celebrate the court's rule. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, has the story.
Ecuador's Constitutional Court denied Chevron's request to revise a national court ruling that sentenced Chevron to pay $9.5 billion to the communities affected by serious environmental and social damage sustained during Chevron operations in the Ecuadorian Amazon between 1964 and 1992.
We, the people and citizens, have said no more to the oil borders, no more mining in our territories. We know that does not guarantee us development for all the peoples and citizens.
The resolution published by the Ecuadorian court argued the oil companies' rights were not violated. Chevron never denied the existence of pollution, but blamed it on Ecuador's state-run Petroecuador, which worked with Texaco in a consortium. Chevron had refused to pay the settlement on the grounds that it was the result of fraud and bribes.
Hoy estamos viviendo un día.
We are living a historic day of resistance of indigenous peoples in defense of collective rights, in defense of territorial rights, and in defense of life.
However, the battle doesn't end here, according to Pablo Fajardo, one of the lawyers of the Union of the Affected. He said Chevron has to pay for the damage caused to over 30,000 indigenous people and campesinos in Ecuador.
Uno es seguir con la acción judicial en Canadá.
First, we're going to proceed with judicial action in Canada. We'll raise the money, which is $350,000, and make the appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. Second, we will look for other states where it may be possible to validate our judgment.
Despite the victory, the union suffered a major setback. Stephen Donziger, the lawyer leading the case in international court, was suspended from practicing law in New York by the court of the First Department in Manhattan for professional misconduct. In a statement, Don Seeger said this decision was based largely on false testimony paid by the Chevron. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
The CEO of Puerto Rico's Electric Power Authority, Walter Higgins, has resigned after being chosen to supervise the privatization of the company while the U.S. territory struggles to restore electricity almost a year after Hurricane Maria. Higgins' withdrawal means another challenge for a bankrupt company, which is $9 million in debt. Governor Ricardo Rosselló said in a statement that Higgins resigned for personal reasons, but did not provide details. Higgins was only appointed in late March. In Barbados, one of Prime Minister Motley's biggest promises, free university tuition, is hitting a stumbling block. There is confusion over who would pay for the upcoming semester. Students are being told they must pay tuition fees themselves by August 26, 2018. However, parents are being told they would be reimbursed as soon as the financial arrangements were finalized. But for some parents, it's still a lot of money that many don't have. University enrollment shot up when Prime Minister Motley announced the waiving of university fees. And with the crop over season around the corner in Barbados, some new taxes are impacting tourist arrivals. The Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association says no. They say business had remained steady despite the taxes announced by Prime Minister Motley last month. On June 11th, Motley announced in her austerity budget that a levy of between $2.50 and $10 per room per night would be applied to all hotel rooms.
As far as some of members have reported to us, there's been no drop-off in accommodation and bookings and such like. I think regardless of that though, I think that people have come to a point where they know there is a levy. And I take, for example, people that are staying with us at Port St. Charles, which might not be the typical example, but most people have paid it without even a question. Most people that are coming next year have just said, you know, we expected it, and we paid in Europe, and we paid in other places, so we expected it, and it probably took a little longer than we thought in being implemented.
Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, heads to Cuba today. Our Laura Prada has more from Havana.
Hello, yes, nice to greet you from Havana. Indeed, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, will be arriving in a few hours to Cuba to realize an official visit where he will meet with the Cuban authorities and he will be officially received by the Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel. This visit is not the first one Ralph Gonsalves realized to the island. He's been always a good friend of Cuba, and also because of his condition as the longest serving CARICOM Prime Minister. He's been part of the CARICOM-Cuba summits since the first one in 2002, and he is also the St. Vincent and the Grenadines is part of the ALBA TCP. So he will be from here, from Havana, telling you what happens with this visit.
Thank you, Laura, for that report. We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Spain says it will not accept the extradition of Catalan leader Carles Puigdemont from Germany based solely on the misuse of public funds. The Spanish Supreme Court rejected the extradition of the former Catalan president if it is not based on charges of rebellion against Madrid's rule. The German court previously dismissed that charge. The Spanish justice system is deciding whether to withdraw the European arrest warrant or if it could present the case before the Court of Justice of the European Union. The two-day NATO summit in Brussels has come to an end. President Trump held a press conference at the end of the NATO meeting, saying he is happy that tremendous progress has been made and that NATO members have agreed to invest 2% of their annual gross domestic product on defense. Earlier, Trump attacked the European leaders, saying that they have not met their financial commitment to the alliance.
We had a very frank and open discussion on burden sharing, both yesterday and today. And actually, I think that discussion has made NATO stronger. All allies have heard President Trump's message loud and clear. We understand that this American president is very serious about defense spending. And this is having a clear impact.
So we've come to the end of this news brief, but for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusyourtv.net/English. You should also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
We are present